I have three texts, with one cited as the source, which is being quoted in this text, Galatians 3:13, where the author, the Apostle Paul, writes, "Christ by purchase released us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse instead of us, because it is written, accursed is every man hanged upon a stake." This is the New World Translation, translating the Greek term zilon as stake. That's also the term that's used in the Greek Septuagint translation of Deuteronomy 21:23. In Matthew 26:47, it says this is the time before Jesus was executed on Astalros or Zilon, as he's being betrayed by Judas. It says, "And while he, Jesus, was yet speaking, look, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs." It uses the plural of Zilon there, "from the chief priests and older men of the people." So here in a text right before it describes the execution of Jesus on Astalros or Zilon, it uses the word Zilon for what can really only be considered a sort of straight club-like instrument. They didn't walk around with crosses and beat people with them. So this would seem to indicate a usage consistent with how the New World Translation renders Zilon or even Stalros as stake or torture stake. But then we get to John 20, and starting in verse 24, it says, "But Thomas, one of the 12, who was called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came." This is after Jesus has been killed, after he's been resurrected in our view, and has appeared to his disciples, but not to Thomas. And so in verse 25, it says, "Consequently, the other disciples would say to him, 'We have seen the Lord,'" talking to Thomas, who wasn't there when they saw him. "But he," that is Thomas, "said to them, 'Unless I see in his hands the print of the nails,'" uses the Greek term helon, the plural of helos, which is a nail, "and stick my finger into the print of the nails," helon, again, plural, "and stick my hand into his side, I will certainly not believe." So as I mentioned previously, those who believe Jesus was killed on a cross point to this and state that he wasn't killed like this, with his hands over each other above his head, but rather with his hands outstretched. So a nail through this hand, a nail through that hand. And so they say, see, nails. One nail in this hand, one nail in this hand, as his hands are outstretched on a cross. Now let's look at the archaeological evidence that we have, which really comes from just two findings, both from the first century. The first was found in the 1960s, a Jewish man who was crucified or killed on a stake or cross, and whose fossilized remains show us not only part of his foot bone, but actually a nail that was used as part of the execution. I'll bring it up and we can take a look at it together. Right here is the first piece of archaeological evidence, and the only one of two pieces of archaeological evidence we have to show how people were executed on either a cross or a stake in the first century. And so on the right of the picture, you can see the fossilized remains of the bone, the foot bone, the ankle, and you can see the nail. And then on the left, you have a recreation. Now notice, the nail goes through the side of the foot, not over the front. And this is important because oftentimes you'll see Jesus, as I'm going to show in a moment, depicted with not only his hands outstretched, but his feet over each other and a nail driven through both of them. But as you can see on this image here, that's not the evidence that we have. That's not what the evidence we have shows. It shows there was a nail that was driven through the side of the foot, of each foot. Because you can see the length of the nail is not long enough for each foot to be side by side, so that only one nail would hold them together. And so, for example, you would have the feet kind of like this, or really like this, right? And so, or I guess like this, and then you would have the nail driven in from the side into each foot, holding it to the upright part of the stauros, zilon, cross, or stake. The next piece of evidence is this fossilized remains of a dead person that was found in Italy, again in the 1st century. And you can see this is the side of the foot, and once again you see the nail hole, consistent with this image here of the nail being driven through the side. And the length of the nail suggests that more than one nail would had to have been used. Just look at the evidence we considered for the feet and apply that to the hands. Then if the hands were stretched above like this, or to the sides, right? And it could have been to the sides like this, or even more difficultly like that, making more pressure on the body versus like that. Either way, the hands and the feet would be nailed on each side, next to each other, not over each other like this, either the hands or the feet. Often, imagery used by those who believe he was killed on the cross depicts his feet over each other and a nail piercing both feet. But that's not the evidence that we have. The evidence that we have is that the nail pierced the side of each foot.